How did I get started in Irish whiskey? My goodness. Well, if you're ready for this, I started in the business in 1974. So it's about 100 years ago, if my mathematics are correct. A bit less, but not much. So I got started, strangely enough. The manager of my football team, his brother was in charge of personnel, it's now called HR, in a company, Irish Distillers company, and he said, we're looking for young guys to start and work for us. Would you like to start working for us? So I did. So I didn't go to university immediately from school. I started in the whiskey business back then, and after a year or two I realised I probably should have gone to university, and therefore I started to study marketing at night in the College of Marketing in Dublin. And that's what took me through my whole career. So starting in 1974, I was 2. Oh no, I wasn't. I was older than that. And then I worked in various different departments, from production through sales and marketing, and then export development. Oh, what do I love about Tullamore DEW? I love the fact that it put 4 very expensive kids through university. Okay, that's what I love about it. I love the history behind it, because it's got a great history. It was inspired by a man, Daniel E. Williams, whose name is DEW. His name through the initials featured on the bottle. I obviously love the whiskey taste of this particular whiskey, and I love the sense that this whiskey is different from any other whiskey in the world. It's the only whiskey in the world that's made the way it's made. It doesn't make it the best whiskey in the world. I'm not claiming that, although, no, but what I'm saying is that because it's a triple distilled version of 3 different types of whiskies, all matured in 3 different types of casks, it's unique in the way that it's made. So not just unique in Ireland, unique in the world. I'm proud of that. So what do I love? I love the history behind it. I love the fact that it tastes great, of course, I'm going to say that. But I also love the fact that it's unique in the way that it's made. And it paid for those kids. So a little bit about the Tullamore Dew Distillery in Ireland. A new distillery was built in 2014, actually. It's a unique distillery in that it comprises distillation of malt whiskey, of pot still whiskey, and now of grain whiskey as well. So we're distilling all 3 types of whiskies in this distillery now. It's the only branded whiskey distillery in the world that does that, because we're the only brand of whiskey that makes our whiskey that way. So that's wonderful. It's wonderfully modern, wonderfully new. And, you know, in some ways you might say, oh, I prefer the old whiskey distilleries that are dark and cobwebbed and etc. And that's fair enough. But with a new whiskey distillery, we know we've got everything perfectly right from a technological point of view. It means that we can get the whiskey absolutely consistently the same every single time, and we have a very, very low carbon footprint. And in the design of a new distillery or any new facility these days, I think we all need to think of the environment, and I'm very proud that our engineers have built a distillery that is of the lowest possible carbon footprint. I'm told it's the lowest in the world. I can't stand over that for sure, but I'm very proud that in terms of being environmentally friendly, we've got it absolutely right, and it makes wonderful whiskey. So I don't actually know the figures as to how Irish whiskey is doing in South Africa at the moment, but I do know South Africa is a very important market for Irish whiskey. I know our own business is doing very well. I know other brands are doing very well. And so I think in general, Irish whiskey would look at South Africa and say, there's a very important and vibrant market for us. And that's one of the reasons I'm here. I'm participating in that growth. I'm loving that. Obviously, I'm here for Whisky Live in Sandton, and that's a big part of the whisky story for whisky companies who want to do business in South Africa. And generally, the feeling is that whisky, and Irish whisky in particular, is very, very vibrant in South Africa. And South African whisky consumers are becoming very well educated and much more aware of various different types of whiskies from different countries, and they seem to have taken to Irish whisky in a big way, which we're very pleased by. The best way to drink a Tullamore DEW whisky is the way you prefer it, and that sounds like a glib answer, but it's not really, in the sense that there are times when I will just want Tullamore DEW whisky, 2 cubes of ice, lovely, perfect, that's what I feel like. Sometimes I might feel like one of the older statement whiskies, like a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old or one of our single malts. Sometimes I'm going to like it actually with apple juice. Can you imagine? With freshly squeezed apple juice. So a tall glass, ice, pour the Tullamore Dew on top of it, freshly squeezed apple juice, preferably over concentrate. I wouldn't be that keen on concentrate, but freshly squeezed apple juice brings out there's kind of an apple note in Tullamore Dew, so it brings it out even more. And if you want to be really swanky, or lawny, as you say here, then you add in two drops of Angostura bitters, and it goes from being fresh apple pie to being baked apple pie. It's kind of with a little bit of spice maybe. So it just depends on my mood. In the summertime I'll drink the long drink actually, and other times I'll have this as a sort of an aperitif before dinner. I might sip one of the single malts or one of the older whiskies as a digestif after dinner. And I'd have to say that I spend my time here meeting people at Whisky Live, and then I will get a chance over the next few days to visit some of the bars, obviously. I suppose if I knew a lot of bars in Johannesburg, I wouldn't be mentioning them to you, because then I'd be picking some preferred over another. That wouldn't be fair to others who say, oh, you didn't mention my bar. Okay, but at the same time, over the next few days, we're working until 10 o'clock every evening at Whisky Live, and if we have the energy at the end of all of that, we'll probably visit a few bars, so I'll get to know it a bit better. I mean, I do know of one or two guys who have whiskey bars and whiskey liquor stores and things like that, some great ones, and I'm going to plan to see those this week. But I don't want to be giving preference to anyone over there. The guys know who I'm talking about. What does the name mean in terms of Tullamore Dew? Tullamore is a place in Ireland. It's a small town in Ireland. Well, we think it's a big town actually, but then we don't have many big places in Ireland. Tullamore has a population of about 12,000 people and about 50,000 cows. No, that's not true. I'm not joking. But about 12,000 people. Tullamore actually used to be known by its Irish language name, which was on Tullamore. And on Tullamore actually means the big hill. All of the places in Ireland had Irish language names until the English came to Ireland. You know they came to Ireland. They weren't invited, you know that. Yeah? But they came anyway, and they gave us one great asset. They gave us the English language. As a result of which, all the place names in Ireland became anglicised from their Irish language name to an English language equivalent. So on Tullamore became Tullamore. Dublin, for example, became Dublin. So all of the places would have changed. And that's how, because the distillery is located there, so obviously it's called after the town. And DEW is the man, Daniel Edmund Williams. Now, he was an amazing man. I don't think you have time for me to tell you all about him, but if I told you this, Daniel Edmund Williams started in the Tullamore distillery business when he was 14-year-old. 14, very young. His father knew the owner. Can you imagine? We're talking back in the 1860s here, okay? His father knew the owner, he got a job. He lived in Mount Mellick, which is 11 miles away, and he couldn't go home every evening because it was too far to walk, so he stayed and lived at the distillery. He lived in the hayloft, actually. As a result of which he got to know everything about the distillery, and by the time he was 25, he was made general manager. Eventually, he bought the distillery from the owner then, and it became the family business. But he was inspiring for the town in many ways. He brought the first motorised vehicle to Tullamore. Okay, you can imagine, the late 1800s, cars in Dublin, but nothing in Tullamore. And so the first motorised vehicle was actually a Tullamore Dew delivery truck. He brought that to Tullamore. He brought the first telephone to Tullamore, and he brought electricity to Tullamore. And that was key, because the electrification of rural Ireland was a big project for the Irish government back in the early 1900s. And Tullamore was one of the first towns in rural Ireland to get electricity, because Daniel Edmund Williams brought it so that it could operate his distillery, and then all of the town were able to feed off it. So he's famous for his whiskey, but he's remembered also for those things in the town. He's kind of an icon in that sense. Yeah. So some whiskies are called after the place. Like you've heard of Bushmills in Ireland. You've heard of Glenfiddich in Scotland. Some whiskies are called after the man. You've heard of Jack Daniels or Johnny Walker or John Jameson. And this whiskey is called after the town and the man. Does that make it better? No, but I like the story.